Welcome to No More Desire, where we build a mindset and lifestyle for lasting recovery from porn. My name's Jake Castleman, and I'm excited to dive in with you. Let's get started, my friend. This has been a long time coming, as we were just discussing before this. Chris and I have rescheduled 3 times, I think, over the last 3 months, something like that.
Yeah, man. So
So
excited to
we're,
be here with you, brother.
yeah, we're finally here. We're finally here. So tell people a bit about you, Chris. I know I've had a little bit of an introduction there, but tell them about what you do, what's important to you. We're talking about polyvagal theory today. I'm really excited about that conversation. But yeah, tell people a bit about you.
I mean, you hit it pretty good there, man. I'm not sure what else would be helpful to add to that, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing the work a long time, and I think, I don't know. I don't know what else would be helpful. I kind of want to jump into the material, but, well, I'll say this. I guess background could be helpful. I mean, I've worked inpatient psych, outpatient, intensive outpatient, nonprofit, private practice. So I've worked in a lot of contexts. I feel like I've been doing the work informally my whole life, but and we can get into my story maybe a little bit. But
Yeah.
I'm Captain Knucklehead, so I feel like I've lived a lot of my life in reverse, where I learned the hard way. I kind of like live the stuff that I'm now you know teaching, training, and experiencing with other guys. But yeah,
Yes. I actually would love that. Let's get more specific with that question of talking a bit about your story, man, and what
yeah.
brought you here.
Yeah, I kind of fumbled my way into this work, and I don't know. I'm not actually, Jake. We didn't even talk about this. I don't really know your audience that well, but I'm a faith-based counselor, and so
Yeah.
I became a Christian in high school, and I think that kind of really set some stage. I got expelled from in middle school. I was running with a little bit of a rough crowd, and the ironic thing was that the thing I got expelled for was actually pretty silly. My friend brought a cap gun to school, and I was in possession of it, but I was
Oh,
getting
so it wasn't even
it
something
wasn't even
cool, right?
yeah, it wasn't cool. I mean, I was cool though. I did spend a lot of time in the principal's office for getting in fights, and I got suspended a number of times. So, but the
Oh
ultimate
gosh.
expulsion was kind of silly. But so yeah, man, I was just in a lot of pain, is what I'm saying. But I became a Christian in high school, and that kind of changed the trajectory of a lot of things. I'd always loved building things, and I thought I wanted to build buildings, but I really started realizing I wanted to build relationships with people, and that felt far more meaningful. And so coaching, counseling. I didn't know what that looked like. I thought I was going to go to grad school for school counseling, but ended up as a clinical counselor. And yeah, man, it's quite a ride, man. I in grad school, I kind of got my heart broken by this woman I thought I really was in love with, and it just sent me in a tailspin of just completely not abandoning my faith, but just really questioning my faith and really struggling through a lot of big things. And lost my virginity that year, started drinking like crazy, going out
Mm.
just, 6, 7 days a week. I mean, to the bars, a lot of one night stands, a lot of pain, man, a lot of, getting DUIs, and, just crazy making. And met my wife a couple years later, working together at an inpatient psych hospital. And that just began like really transform, kind of bring me back to the church and bringing back to my faith. Um, and around that time, I discovered the CSAT training and realized that there was this whole thing called sex addiction. And I was like, oh, this isn't just like bad habit. I can't just get my act together. And so all that to say, like, I feel like God put me into addiction work when I was working inpatient psych. Even though I was out getting DUIs and sleeping around, I'm leading these groups in a hospital, like helping people get sober while I'm out, just being a complete idiot. And so that, I guess that's what I would say is my life has always felt like I'm kind of living the depravity, and then the Lord's kind of using this work to kind of help me experience recovery myself. And by God's grace, man, I mean, I've been walking in recovery now for 10, 15 years, and sober from all of my primary drugs of choice, and always growing, right? Always learning and getting deeper into my codependency and my workaholism and other areas where I'm unhealthy. But yeah, man.
Wow. I can relate to a lot of that, man. I love what you said about always working, always growing, workaholism and codependency, and those have all been patterns in my life too, and things that, I'm currently always learning more about and growing in those ways. And I think that story, Chris, of like dark night of the soul kind of thing, and you going through all these struggles with addictions and everything else. This gives the undertone of meaning behind what you do, and really what you want to help other people do as well. I wish that that wasn't necessary, but it feels like that's so often the pattern, you know?
Yeah.
So really inspiring, amazing that you are where you are. And a vast majority of the people who listen to this podcast are Christians. So
Cool.
definitely speaking about God and all that is perfectly welcome. So
Yeah, and I'm never going to shy away from it, but I also want to be mindful and honoring to people that are,
yeah.
because there's a fair amount of my clients that come to see me, and by us, I just mean we're quite a community at this point of men that are in recovery groups, and they hear about what we're doing, and they love it. So guys that are agnostic and atheist and different faith backgrounds, and so I welcome all, and I don't, but I'm also not going to sugarcoat as far as like my story and who God is to me and what that has done, what he's done in my life. So
I love that. I love that, man. Well, so let's tell people a bit about polyvagal theory first off, how it relates to mental health, how it relates to addiction, and it's a really, really cool field. So I'm very new to this, by the way. So I'm coming in with a
yeah,
newbie
well, that
perspective,
makes
but I'm
two of
studying
us.
a little bit. Okay, yeah, yeah, right. I don't believe that, but yeah, I'd love to dive into it, man.
Yeah, well, so I know I think you found out that this is something that I've integrated a lot into the work. And so you're like a dog on a bone, man. I know you're excited to talk about it. Could I back up one step and
Yeah.
give a little bit of background of the brain, for me, a little bit, not necessarily more macro, but maybe like the building blocks of the brain and then understanding how the nervous system fits into that. Would that be okay?
Yes, that would be wonderful because this is really the word polyvagal theory. I'm assuming that probably at least 50% of the people listening right now don't even know that term.
No.
So,
Which is
yes.
both overwhelming, but also kind of sexy because you're like, ooh, this sounds shiny. Maybe this will save
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
So this is going to change everything. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start
Yeah.
there.
Let me back up and kind of give the main structures because my passion is the brain. So that's one thing that actually would be good to know about me if you know nothing about me. One, I'm a CSAT certified sex addiction therapist. I think that's really important because in our field, I think that is the gold standard, right? Dr. Patrick Carnes is in his 80s now, and he's literally written the book on recovery, rewritten the book on addiction recovery. Quite frankly, he wrote the book on sexual addiction recovery, but in doing so, all of his research and the way that he conceptualizes recovery based on the neuroscience of the brain and how the brain changes in recovery. I think he has rewritten the book from the old school models of just classic chemical dependency recovery, like with the Hazelden model and such. It's transformed the addiction recovery world, in my opinion. Um, so I'm a CSAT. I think that's important. I train under Dr. Patrick Carnes. And then maybe even more importantly is I'm a brain guy, man. So, I worked with Dr. Carnes directly for about 5, 6 years on a multi-million-dollar study called the Fulbright study looking for the genetic link for sex addiction. So I was one of 6 research sites in the country. And that's my passion, man, is learning about the brain, studying the brain, understanding the brain, not just with regards to how addiction affects the brain. I think that's been, a growing passion in the field. But for me, it's even further upstream, which is like, how do we understand the brain recovering from addiction and really getting healthy and whole and optimal functioning in long-term recovery? Does that make sense? I'm just
Hmm.
fascinated by like what actually changes the brain. Um,
Yeah.
so
100%. Me too.
would that be okay? Just quick. I think I can do it pretty quickly.
Hey, quick or not, I love to talk about the brain as well. This is my bread and butter. So let's
Cool.
dive
Okay.
in. Yeah.
Well, so I grabbed my brain from across the room, so I didn't have to go grab it. So this is my quick brain model. I don't know if you have anyone
I
I don't know if
like
this is
that.
video or audio, but
Yep.
I'm going to talk it
Both.
through
Yeah.
both ways. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
So there's 3 primary structures in the brain, right? The brain, the first thing to know is the brain begins wiring electrically around 5, 6, 7 weeks in utero. And so, but for simplicity's sake, we'll say that the brain wires electrically from birth to about 25, 26 years old, and it wires from the bottom of the brain in the spinal cord. Actually, Dan Siegel talks about how there's brain cells in the heart and the gut, and really the first electrical wiring we see is really in the heart, literally, and then
Mm,
begins wiring into the spinal cord, up through the
mhm.
brain stem, and then into the top parts of the brain. So, but for our sake today, we'll just say that brain stem is the bottom part of the brain. this is roughly 0 to about 9 years old is where this is most robustly wiring. And so, you think of like infancy, young childhood, it's a lot of like this controls mostly bodily function. So you're looking at like, how does the, balance, coordination, heart rate, respirations, body temperature, blood pressure, like this is controlling most of the autonomic functions in the body. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And so
Yep.
that's all kind of taking place. I think of this like the child brain, right? The youngest part of the brain. Then you have the limbic system, the teenage brain, the midbrain, right? So this is where addiction is housed, right? Pleasure reward center, fight, flight, freeze. This is also where emotion is most robustly happening with the amygdala, memory with the hippocampus. So you've got a lot of like, basically we'll call it the teenage brain, and it's roughly 10 to let's say 16, 17 years old is when this is mostly electrically wiring. It's not that nothing's happening here in the child years. That makes sense. Like there's wiring
Right.
happening on all levels. I'm being overly simplified here, but child brain, teenage brain, and then adult brain. The cortex is the part that you see in pictures that wraps around the brain, and then as it wraps fully around, the prefrontal cortex is the very last part of the brain to finish wiring, and that's roughly coming online really most robustly around 16, 17 years old and finishes around 25, 26 years old. So does that make sense? Kind of the three main building blocks of the brain. Um,
Yep. So before that, we're just mindless idiots, and then we finally become adults with some
well,
sort of
that's
sensibility.
That's the plan. Yeah. But unfortunately, what happened for a lot of us is that we, in teenage years, when we start firing dopamine and limbic activity excessively over a long period of time, there's a book called Biology of Desire by Mark Lewis, and he talks about how what we see in the SPECT scans of the brain is that when you overactivate the limbic system, when this is lit up like a Christmas tree, what starts happening in the prefrontal cortex is it shuts down electrical function in the prefrontal cortex, right? So it's almost like it creates this ceiling right here at the bottom of the adult brain and top of the limbic teenage brain. And this part of the top part of the brain goes dark, and we're just not in our prefrontal cortex. And so the problem for a lot of men and women, I work primarily with men, so I speak to men a lot, but
Yeah, me
but
too.
for
Yep.
all for as people, is that we started developing these coping strategies, which, sorry, I'm all over the place, but a lot of
No,
that
this is
was
great.
based on pain that we experienced in 0 to 9, right? So a lot of our story is attachment rooted, and this is nonverbal, pre-verbal. We don't have a lot of cognitive thought in the bottom part of our brain, as well as in the right side of our brain, these are the places where most trauma and pain, gets lodged into the brain. This is like Bessel van der Kolk's book, Body Keeps the Score. So we,
Hmm.
we get stuck in our attachment wounds. And so the child's in pain, and we find these coping strategies. We find, this brain, the pleasure reward center comes online, and it's like, oh man, this feels awesome, right? Like, and this is something that Dan Siegel talks about in his book Brainstorm with the teenage brain. It's like teenagers have a different limbic system than adults, right? Like you put a 14-year-old in a Tesla and me in we're both sitting in this new Tesla, and we're both going to, floor it and go 140 on the freeway. His brain is lit up like a Christmas, like his limbic system is going crazy. And this is just a normal teenage brain, right? Because this is the time when that part of the brain's coming online. But for you and I sitting in that car, it's both cool. Like this is really exciting. We get that, and adrenaline rush, the
Hmm.
endorphins. But we also have a prefrontal cortex that says, "Hey, man, I got crap to do tomorrow. Like, let's keep it, let's keep it under 100, right? Like, let's be safe, right? Because we have
Yeah.
this brake pedal versus like the teenager has all gas and no brake. Um, I'm gonna
And
take a breath
honestly,
because I've been talking a
no,
lot.
I think that's wonderful. It's such an awesome covering of how the brain develops and all these different areas. And one of the things that I thought of as you were saying that, Chris, is how I feel like in my teenage years, just like you're saying, my brain would light up like a Christmas tree when I would do things that were thrilling. And, I did drugs and alcohol and all sorts of different risky behaviors and things. And it was just things were so thrilling. And I remember when I got into my 20s, especially mid 20s and then 30s, life becomes deeper, more meaningful,
Mm,
but it's not so, at least for me, it's not so that raw thrill. I don't think I feel as much, and I think I needed to grieve that for a while, like,
mm.
I don't know what, and I often wondered, "What's wrong with me? Why don't I feel so excited like I used to?" Just really viscerally excited, and I think that's part of growing up. I mean, am
Oh
I
my God.
correct in saying that?
That's so well said, man. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And I love like I went to school with Jay Stringer, who wrote a book called Unwanted, and he talks about
Yes.
six
Wonderful book.
said yeah, six experiences that kind of keep us stuck. And one was futility. One is like that feeling that like, man, I'm just not, where I want to be. And I love you use the word grieving. Like I think so many of us, that is an appropriate transition in life where and so biochemically, we're moving away from dopamine as a primary driver and more into oxytocin, which
Mhm.
oxytocin is really produced in the hypothalamus, the bottom part of the brain, but it's regulated in the top part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, the adult brain. So and that's that like warm, slow burn of connection. And so we're getting to polyvagal in a moment because that also shows up in polyvagal theory. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're learning how to not be driven by the I always describe it like the kindling of the brain. And instead we're learning how to develop the coals of the brain if we're talking fire
Mhm.
analogy here, right? So dopamine, I always think of like kindling. Like if I'm freezing, I can throw kindling on it and it'll burn fast and hot, but it goes out fast and hot, right? And so at that transitional period you're talking about as we're moving up into the prefrontal cortex, it's like, can I learn to slow down and experience some of the like boring moments of life and
Right.
still experience meaning and connection and contentment, really? Like, can I experience solitude and presence? And that's hard, man, especially if we didn't have a model for that, either in our primary attachment figures or our peer groups. And that's a brutal
Yes.
season. That's when I went offline and just went into my addictions because it was like, screw it, I'm just
Yeah.
I'm gonna double down on my limbic, my teenage brain, right? Rather than
Right.
grow up and be a man.
'Cause you feel like that's kind of the answer, at least it was for me when I was, in my late teenage years, early 20s. It was like, well, whatever I can do to just feel happy, right? In other words, just pursue the pleasure, like really get my hit, right?
Mhm.
And it's like you said, it's fast to light up and fast to burn out. I'm not sure if that's the word to use, but yeah. And so it's just this roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
Of highs and lows. And then moving to, I often said to multiple clients, what we're pursuing with pornography is this peak pleasure, right?
Mhm.
So how high can I peak my pleasure with no responsibility or risk on my end or risk of rejection or anything like that? Ultimate peak. And I have to work with clients, and I'm sure you've done the same in actually grieving pornography
Yeah.
and the addiction. And so every guy says, "Grieve what? Like it's ruined my life." But this is your companion. This is
Oh my god.
something that you've grown so attached to, both the pleasure of it and the pain of it, as Jay Stringer talks about. And you have to you have to go through a grieving process because you're moving. If you choose to leave this behind, you're moving more and more into a life of meaning and purpose and peace, more that slow burn you're like you're talking about, and you're gonna leave behind these peaks. You're gonna have good times. You can be happy,
Yeah.
but it's not ever gonna be like that
Yeah.
again. That's hard, you know?
Yeah.
It's a
That's
hard
so
thing.
beautiful, man. It's so well said. Yeah, and it's scary, and we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to feel those kinds of feelings, and stepping into loss, stepping into loneliness, stepping into like, this like these natural feelings is just so much easier to turn back to what we know, right? There's a saying in AA, we develop solutions to a problem. The problem is our pain, right? But the solutions became the problem. Those solutions created more pain. And so to your point, man, I mean, letting go of that binky, as Drew Boa describes it, or like letting go
Yeah.
of this comfort blanket is scary. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. And it's also a quick plug. It's also why I think we need people around us to be able to support us through that, right? We need, someone else to cling to when we're learning to let go of that thing that's, got us to
Mhm.
this point.
Mhm. Well, let's dive into
Yeah.
polyvagal theory, these three different states and all
Yep.
the other kind of basics of how it functions.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting me do that quick intro on the brain because when we talk about the nervous system, it's kind of tricky, right? Like I basically just gave you maybe like the structural format of the brain and how it's built. And then within that, you have the wiring system. So maybe you could think of like what we just talked about as like the gears. And this analogy is going to break down, but and then maybe the 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 nervous system is kind of the wiring or the fuels, or I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's
Forget the
I think
analogy.
it's It's coming together. There's something there. There's something
But
there.
in the same way that there's a kind of what Dan Siegel calls the triune brain, we have these three primary structures of the structures of the brain. We also have a triune nervous system. The nervous system is really kind of built with three main parts, right? So as you mentioned, you've got the at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, in polyvagal theory. By the way, poly, just to break this down, so it's not as
Yeah.
foreign or abstract or
Right.
overwhelming. Poly means many, right? The vagus nerve is what Stephen Porges is the founder, the creator of polyvagal theory, and he was looking at the vagus nerve and how it runs. There's two branches of the vagus nerve. It runs in one branch runs down the front of your body, and the other one runs in the back. Both of them come down through the neck. This is my layman's terms here, but and so ventral means front and dorsal means back or bottom. And so, so when we talk about polyvagal, we're looking at the several branches of the vagus nerve, right? Front and back. And so, so even in the polyvagal, we have the dorsal vagal, part of the nervous system.
Mhm.
And then we'll get into the ventral vagal, as well. And in between that, we've got sympathetic response. So here's the three primary things of polyvagal theory. You've got, uh, the dorsal vagal shutdown, right? Anytime we're in dorsal vagal, we're basically dropping into that fight, flight, freeze, bottom part of the brain. This is like where we're going offline. This shows up a lot of different ways, but it can be shown, experienced as like dissociation. This is like in that freeze state. We are just underactivated. Yeah, it's like the most primitive part of survival. Go ahead.
It's the shutdown, right? Like one of the things that I think of is we as men, especially when we struggle with addiction, we can be prone, if I'm in a conflict with my wife and emotions are heightened, there's a lot of anger and, we're just blowing up. And then there's the feeling of just like immense shame and this shutdown and just, I'm not even going to engage. I'm checking out. I'm not emotionally present at all. That's what strikes me kind of as dorsal vagal zone. Would that be correct?
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And we'll get into it with acting out like pornography, but
Yeah.
it's actually like what's dorsal. I heard it said one time, if you don't find a solution to your sympathetic arousal states, you're going to go dorsal, meaning you're going to go act out. And when you act out, you're basically you're chasing that dorsal dive. You're basically chasing that numbed out state because you don't know how to deal with a sympathetic response. So let me talk about what sympathetic is, right? Sympathetic activation, but basically, when you're looking at porn or acting out, you're trying to create a synthetic dorsal dive. You're basically trying to numb out pain, right?
I have never heard anybody put it that way, actually. That's fascinating. You're chasing that dive.
Mhm.
Yeah, because most people, I think we'd think of it as like a stimulation and excitement kind of thing. But
Mhm.
you're saying that we're seeking to just turn off the sensation.
It's too overwhelming for the brain. So I know that we're pleasure seeking for sure. So let's talk about sympathetic and where it starts. But ultimately, right, we're wanting to we want to be offline. We want to be we don't want to feel all that activation, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's
So,
painful.
yeah. Okay. So we have these two states, right? Sympathetic and then dorsal vagal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So the next rung on the ladder. So I'm starting at the bottom with dorsal
Right.
vagal, right?
It's the most,
Um,
okay. Bottommost.
Yeah, if you're getting chased by a tiger, right? It's just like that, it's fight or flight, right? And it's like, I'm going to try and run as fast as I can, but I can't outrun the tiger. So the dorsal is just like, okay, last ditch effort. We just we play dead. We go numb. We collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Sympathetic response is when I see the tiger and I'm like, holy crap, I got to get out of here. And so, our first attempt is to run. And so, sympathetic. So by the way, sympathetic in Latin, it really means to elevate, escalate. So anytime we're in a sympathetic response, we're going up into an activated state. I was just kind of crossing my wires here because we have a sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, but
Right.
parasympathetic response is really what dorsal dive is, right? It's where everything drops out, bottoms out, right? The opposite of that is when everything's moving up in a sympathetic state. So heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, body temperature goes up, respirations go up. Everything is escalating and elevating in the nervous system, right? And sympathetic responses, anytime we're in pain, I'm scared, I'm overwhelmed. Sympathetic responses, also pleasure seeking. So it can be pleasurable and painful, right? But it's that escalation, elevation of adrenaline, norepinephrine, dopamine. I mean, it's quite a neural cocktail that happens there. Again, a lot of sympathetic responses happening in the limbic system for sure, which is why I wanted to just make sure we understood kind of, biochemically what's happening, like which parts of the brain are getting activated when I'm in a sympathetic response.
That actually, so what that makes me think of is the craving state when we're escalating and escalating, and I'm overwhelmed with the craving and the desire for pornography, and it's overtaking my body. Some people will start shaking, right? That be kind of the sympathetic state?
1000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also in healthy ways, like, just to be really clear, like, on all these, like, God created our brain, our nervous system, to reflect his beauty, his goodness, his glory, in my opinion, and so, uh,
Yeah.
and it shows up a million different ways, and everything's on a continuum, and so, like, just to give you an idea right now, like, you are somewhere on that ladder, and I am probably more in sympathetic than I would prefer in this moment, right? Because I'm so passionate and I care
Yeah.
about this stuff, right? And I know I have a limited window, and I
Yeah.
didn't probably prep as well as I could have, and so
Sure.
I'm probably fire hosing your listeners here, but uh, and so I'm probably a little bit too much in sympathetic in this very moment and not enough in ventral, and so we'll talk about how to get into ventral and how to breathe and kind of reset and be grounded, because when we're in a sympathetic response, we're really not going to be able to connect as well to other human beings. We're in a survival state of sorts. Um, so let me just take a ventral breath here and let you.
Yeah, right? That's what I was gonna say. We could do a little, box breathing or some breath work
Yeah.
here for a minute. Yeah, I actually at the beginning of each session I do with clients, I just do a brief I'm sure there's a term for it, but it's 4 seconds in the nose, 8 seconds out the mouth, and I'll do that for, several rounds, and it's so calming, it's so focusing, very calming for the nervous system. That helps so much, so much. Yeah. So the ventral vagus state, do we want to move into that
Yeah.
next and helping people understand what that is? So it's not dorsal vagal, shut down, checked out kind of I almost think of it as like a helplessness state. Is that associated with
The
the dorsal
dorsal.
vagal? Is that
Yeah.
associated with that? Yeah.
That's why I tried to show you the building, like the ladder of the brain, because, yes, when we're in dorsal, we're shutting down, and it's the child brain. It's the helpless part. It's like we're literally collapsing onto the floor. If
Mm.
whether it's a tiger or just a scary narcissistic mom,
Yeah.
we can't get, I
Yeah.
can't get my needs met. Right. And so it's like, well, Gabor Mate talks a lot about this. Like, if I have a parent that's not seeing me, it's like, well, I try and express my hurt, my anger, my frustration, but I get shut down. And so eventually I stop fighting. I just kind of like collapse in, right? And so that's the
Mm.
dorsal shutdown, right? We just go offline.
Mhm. And so this is one of the things I was thinking is, I feel like for the entirety of my childhood and my teenage years and up into my early 20s, I was so frequently in sympathetic,
Mhm.
and I dropped into dorsal vagal and I just go between those
Mhm.
so often. I mean, I had so much anxiety and social anxiety. It's like I felt it when I was alone. I felt it when I was with people. It was just always anxious. And that was my life. I didn't actually know that I felt that way or that other
Yeah.
people didn't just feel that way all the time until in my early 20s when I started to study psychology and get to know some things and studied social anxiety as well. And I realized, oh my gosh, I experience this all the time. Other people don't experience this. What,
Right.
you know? And so just always in that sympathetic,
And
very
that's what I was
heightened.
saying earlier, is that so porn became, I mean, it's so funny because we think of it mostly as an activator because it's so exciting and stimulating, but you hit it on the spot. It's like I'm in a red line state with my anxiety, and I found something that's pleasurable that matches that state, but it's almost like you need to match the RPMs in the car, and then the porn actually like is the thing that is the brake pedal that actually brings it down into the dorsal. That's the thing that calms your anxiety down, right?
Wow. And it's almost like it's kind of a substitute or a fabrication, I feel like, of trying to enter ventral vagal. Perhaps maybe but
Yeah.
I think of it that way. We're trying to do that, but it's very unsuccessfully. right?
Yeah, and to be clear and make sure I'm not oversimplifying this, porn is actually hitting all three parts of the nervous system. You're creating a sympathetic ventral connection with others. It happens to be a two-dimensional screen and no connection at all, but it's an attempt at that. It's obviously highly arousing and pleasure seeking, but it also numbs us out ultimately. So it's the full cocktail, right? So it's not
Mhm.
like
Yes.
it's not the dorsal lever is what I'm saying. It's just, but I do think that that is kind of ultimately the core is like, we want to shut that down, but we also want to connect with a human being and we don't know how to do that. So a screen's a lot safer and easier. So it's,
Well, and I was actually listening to Drew Bowe's podcast the other day. He had a Dr. Anna Lemke on there, and she was talking about
mhm.
how, pornography or she was talking about social media, but pornography could, say the same thing about it, which is it plays right into our need for human relationships and connection.
Yeah.
One of the reasons it's so insidiously addictive because it's playing into my deep need for connection and my sexuality, right? So two of my most primary aspects of who I am as a human being, they're always going to be there. It's never going to go away, right? And so with something like drugs, very difficult to overcome, but I don't need drugs, but I definitely need human connection, and sexuality is always going to be a part of me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been
Mhm.
said in some essay circles that sexual acting out is like being a crack addict with the crack pipe attached to your body. It's like, hmm, it's a whole different beast, man.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
it's true. And I
So
make
I
that
was speaking,
same analogy. Mhm.
So I was speaking to the dorsal. We talked about sympathetic and obviously the pleasure seeking and the dopamine. I mean, that's pretty well talked about these days in these circles, right? But yeah, ultimately what we're moving towards is that ventral vagal, which if we're just looking at the ladder here, right? So if you ever see you can just Google polyvagal theory and if you look at the images on that, you'll see they often use a ladder. And so you've got at the bottom the dorsal, then you've got sympathetic, and then at the top they don't associated with the brain, but are you with me? Can you see how this maps over the lens over the top of the brain structures we just talked about?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so ventral vagal is kind of the adult brain. It's the
Prefrontal
attachment.
cortex.
Prefrontal cortex,
Is that right?
and so
But
yep,
yeah.
that's the structure of the brain. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm putting a lot of concepts
No,
on
no.
here, but I trust that
No, this is
people
great.
these days, yeah, you guys are all brilliant, with the internet. So the other term that we use a lot with ventral vagal is social engagement part of the brain. And again, this is happening from a structural standpoint in the top part of the adult prefrontal cortex brain. So, yeah, when we're in ventral, so from a nervous system perspective, the ventral vagus nerve travels down the front side of the body and it really connects with every major organ, heart, lungs, gut. And honestly, both extend all the way down to the genitals, right? So, that is the bottom of the vagus nerve is the genitals, both front and back. So just to be aware there, right? This is, all connected as part of the system. But when we talk about ventral vagal, for the most part, we're talking about like on the front side, the ability for the top part of the brain and the body to experience deep bonding and connection, right? It is where oxytocin is happening. I'm talking about a lot. I'm talking about, just to be clear here, we're talking about brain structure, nervous system, and neurochemistry, like the neurochemicals in the brain. And I know that's complex, but I don't think you can just talk about polyvagal theory without also understanding where that's happening, where it's lighting up in the brain, and what neurochemicals are being released in that experience, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, 100%. So let's talk about specifically ventral vagal and more about that state and
Yep.
how it works, what it incorporates.
Yeah, well, again, so I mean, that ventral vagus nerve travels down the front of the body and really connects with all key organs in the body. And so the beautiful thing about this polyvagal theory is that we are not victims to our nervous system, right? We're not victims to our circumstance. Like we actually have a lot of autonomy and control over that. And so we can re-regulate when our nervous system is getting out of whack. One of the most important things about that, Patrick Carnes said one time, we can't do what we want until we know what we do. And I just love that line because until I know where I'm at, right? A moment ago, I said, man, I'm kind of in my sympathetic nervous system, right? I'd say 60% sympathetic, maybe 40% ventral. And so it's like, okay, I want to get 60% into ventral, 40% into sympathetic. I want to like bring down the sympathetic, turn that down. And the way that I can do that is that I can really, instead of trying to get out of sympathetic, we want to get into ventral vagal. Does that make sense? And so we want to breathe into these places where where our system is in distress. And the beautiful thing is we can have a lot of impact, right? And
And is this
so,
very
yeah.
much embodiment practices are a key part of this?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that when you say that? Like,
So breath work, being deeply attuned to what I'm feeling in the body, dance, movement, things of that
yeah.
nature. Hmm.
Yeah, beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. The more we can get into our body, which again, ironically, like when we're acting out, we're really going offline and getting out of our body. We're not attentive, attuned, connected to our body. Um, so yeah, it's really like the breath work is probably the easiest, lowest hanging fruit of how to re-regulate. Not just really it regulates heart rate because it slows the heart rate down is a big part of it, right? We're really trying to like slow the system down and yeah, for me, I like to put my hands on my heart. We're trying to match heart rate with respiration. So there's a lot of different forms of box breathing, like four count, 5 count. There's a book James Nestor wrote called Breath, and he says the optimal breath is 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. You'll see a lot of these different numbers in different places, right? And depending on what you're looking for. But I think the most important is that I'm counting 4 or 5 on my heartbeats. That's the count, is that I'm counting my heartbeats and trying to match my respiration with my heart rate. That lines up that HRV and it really calms the whole nervous system down.
That's so interesting because so things that I've read is it's important to have a longer out breath than an in
Yes.
breath because that's bringing you more into parasympathetic versus sympathetic, which is not to be confused with what we're talking about here with polyvagal states. But
Yeah. And I
that's what
guess
I've been told.
totally, 1000%. So, yeah, most like good box breathing, I think, does a longer exhale than inhale. And even James Nestor talks about the importance of the exhale and how critical that is. All I'm trying to say there is actually that, like, the more you read on the internet, the more you see. I'm just saying some will do 4-4-8 breathing, some will do 5 in, 5 out. I'm saying it honestly, if you're just being mindful of your breath and you're slowing it down and you're trying to regulate it, that's where I think the power is not about 4 seconds or 5 seconds or this in, that out. I think it's really more just about mindfully being aware of your body and your breath.
Well, so I started Wim Hof breathing. I've been doing it every day for probably consistently the last year, but I started about 3 years ago. I've taken a couple breaks and things like that here and there, but it has it has helped me so much. Um, one to kind of tolerate stress better, right? To be more present and calm under stress because you're voluntarily hyperventilating essentially when you do Wim
Yes.
Hof, right? And then you're expelling your breath and you're not breathing for a full minute or minute and a half
Yeah.
or more if you can do more. And so that's beneficial. But what I've been practicing, especially the last few months, is just I really want to learn more about how to get present with my body sensations and what I'm feeling in my body and with my breath. Throughout my life, it's just, my mind, I'm always thinking, words and thoughts and constant, right?
Yeah.
And so practicing that embodiment. And so one of the things that's actually helped me is doing workouts with I used to listen to audiobooks and podcasts and stuff during my workouts every single time. And I didn't realize how I was kind of 50%, taking in knowledge, which is great, but 50% doing that and then 50% with my body. And I've been practicing now. This is only the last few weeks, just putting it all away and just being present with the movement, my muscles, my body, my breath, very focused on that. And that I looked up some research that was done on this actually. When we practice embodiment and we learn how to do that, it builds our ability, our capacity for interoception, right? So the ability to sense the internal states of the body, which then actually enables me to feel more empathy, to be more emotionally engaged, and to have a greater sense of identity. And only in a few weeks, I've started to experience enhancement in those areas, but I didn't real I then saw that research and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's what I'm experiencing."
Yes.
It's so powerful. It's so simple, right? But it's so powerful just being
Yeah.
in the body, with the breath, right?
So beautiful, man.
So this
What a
is one of
great
the ways
flex.
to yeah, go ahead.
No, I just affirm like that. That is beautiful. And, I love it. And what's fascinating too is that the more connected you get to your body, even as you're sharing that, Jake, I'll just be, candid, is that now it's lighting up to like my social engagement of like, oh yeah, that gets me excited. And I feel compassion and love for you. And I feel excited for what you're doing. It's like, I want more of that. And so this is where it starts like the interplay of both the interoception and the neuroception of like, or the
Mhm.
co-regulation that we're like, you are more self-regulated in yourself, which helps me feel more drawn in and feel more connected to you. This is what a lot of us did not get from our parents, right? Uh,
Right. Yes.
so it's fun.
We're all so easily distracted, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mentioned on the front end of the call, my workaholic mind is similar to what you're describing. It's like, well, information is gonna be the transformation, right? But it's like, no, no, no. Surrendering some of the information, really getting more connected. I'm with you, man. I started running probably like 3 months ago without audio, and it was like, oh, there's birds actually awake at 5 in the morning. I didn't know that. It's like I start hearing sounds that, yeah,
Yes. Because it's like the chase, right? I felt like I've been in this race my whole life of I got to catch up. I'm falling behind. I need to learn more. I have to go faster. I have to become more capable and all this. And it's that what's interesting is pulling out of that race to whatever degree and just being like, look, I know I have things I want to learn, but to be frank, my body deserves my attention.
come
Like
on, that's beautiful.
to think of my body as I've started to think of it as like an individual, like someone I have a relationship with. And it's like, would it be a caring relationship for me to really, just halfway pay attention to someone all the time or to actually fully be there for them at certain times of the day and like, hey, I'm here. Like we're
Yeah,
together. And that, I feel like I'm getting rewarded for that in spades, and just like my body's finally like, thank you. Yes. Thank you for seeing me. And thank you for, being, which is a totally different way to think about the body. Cause we think like I am my body. But the more I do this, I'm learning like, no, like I have a relationship with my body.
that's so
Yeah.
beautiful, man. It'd be curious too, just for your listeners to check in and notice, when I am like the first part of this podcast, first part of our time together, as I'm blasting you with information to notice like what your nervous system is doing versus when we kind of like you and I, Jake, slow down, when you slow down, thanks for leading me in that, and just kind of breathe and get into your body. And then, now we are more connected. It's like, oh, I can feel that. Like everyone around you can feel that, right? As you kind of slow down. And so what a gift, not just to yourself, but to people that you're in relationship with. And again, there's more presence and more connection. And does it mean that the first part of the podcast or that all the information is bad? It's like, of course not. Like this information is really helpful, but it's really that gas brake, right? And kind of being able to self-regulate of, am I speeding up and getting too far into my left brain and thinking too much? Am I slowing down enough? Do I need to speed back up and get more in that sympathetic state? Because I love the excitement, passionate state. I love reading. I love learning. I love growing. I love, so it's not, neither are bad. It's just knowing like where I'm at and am I making a value-based decision in this moment of how I'm connecting with myself and others.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the other things that I've experienced, and I'm sure you can speak to this, is I feel like my mind has quieted
Mm,
somewhat, right? Through this just these, setting aside time. And along with this, and I'm doing a 30-day challenge right now, and some people have decided to be involved in that as well and do it with me, listeners and clients and things. But the
is this the
30-day
relay?
challenge is no, actually,
Yeah.
this is
November.
just my
Got it. Cool. All
thing.
right. Love
But
it.
yes, November is the no porn November, right? So
Yes.
ironically enough, this is about presence and embodiment. So the challenge is 2 hours a day in the morning and 2 hours at night. Put all electronics away. Put your smartphone away. No distractions. None of this back and forth and checking messages and scrolling videos, any of that, just put it away. And then, an optional portion of it is the workouts with no audio at all. And so I'm
Oh,
doing
cool.
both those things, and that my clients are doing it too. They've experienced amazing things in a really short period of time, just a few weeks, right? And just feeling more present and feeling more regulated and, feeling less cravings. And just, they're like, wow, all I do is, on my drive to work, instead of listening to stuff, I just listen, I'm just present. I just sit, I pray, I breathe, I just be with my thoughts, be
Mm.
with the moment. And oh my gosh. I mean, I think I've been coming out of this tunnel in a lot of ways, and and I consider myself, less extreme than what a lot of us go through, because I already thought I was doing really well. And I'm like, I've been in this tunnel of just, this back and forth between my phone and the work and the productivity and all this. When I am productive now, I have more focus, I have more
Yes.
attention.
Yes.
And when I am creating material or content or things like that, I feel like things are more clear. Ideas are more clear. Things come more easily. Where I thought that it was all about, well, I got to be thinking about this all the time and ideating all the time and learning all this stuff all the time. And
Yeah.
when you're just in this, what would be sympathetic kind of state all the time,
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
you're not very effective.
No. No.
Yeah. But that's what the world says is just productivity 100% of the time,
Yeah.
always going.
One of my favorite affirmations in Workaholics Anonymous says, "The slower I go, the faster I grow." And I just think that's
Mm,
so beautiful, and it speaks to what
yes.
you're talking about there. And yeah, just to be clear too, when you're in ventral vagal and when you're in prefrontal, um, just to give you some more information here, Dan Siegel says
Yeah.
there's 8 domains of the prefrontal cortex, but a lot of it is this: you feel calm, you feel compassionate, you feel connected to others, right? We're also talking about the 8 C's with interfamily
IFS.
systems, right?
Yeah.
That when we're in true self, that is our experience, right? So everything you're describing, man, it's like you're surrendering a lot of these things that drive sympathetic response and limbic activity. It's exciting to feel like you're learning, and dude, I'm like, I mean, real time, bro. Like that is like my crack of choice these
Right.
days. It's like, dude, you went from
Learning,
like
right? Yeah.
Reese's Pieces, went from porn to Reese's Pieces to like audiobooks, right? And I just
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
with you, man. Real time, man. It's just like learning to surrender that and let go of that. And really that's about trust. And like your point is grieving. Like, what if I don't know everything? What if I don't, it's like, what if I just like give myself permission to be in this moment and just, experience like genuine love and connection with Jake on this call right now.
Mm,
So
thanks, man. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And one of the things I found fascinating kind of through that IFS lens, right? If we talk about the dorsal, sympathetic, and ventral, right? Ventral is that state of, I would say, higher self or just self, right? That it's referred to in IFS. And then the sympathetic is more kind of manager state, right? And then dorsal vagal would be more firefighter state, I
I would say
suppose. It kind of
exile.
depends, though. Oh,
I would say
that's
exile.
right. So sympathetic is more the protective, right? So firefighter or manager, and then exile would be the dorsal. Yeah,
Yeah.
that checks out. Yes, and
And isn't
so
that
so we
beautiful? That's at the
yeah.
beginning
Go
of the
ahead.
call when you wanted to talk about poly, and I think people like know so much now these days with all these different theories. I think one of the beautiful things for me that I'm seeing is the integration of all these. Like they're all really speaking the same thing. That's all I was really trying to bring is like, dude, if we just put like layer upon layer, you can kind of start seeing like, man, we're all like, it's all describing and revealing kind of the same experiences in these different things. They're not all disintegrated and disconnected, right? They're all overlapped and integrated. So that for me is just so beautiful, like the tapestry of that and seeing how they're connected. And so,
Yes, 100%. I love that. So getting more kind of specific about examples, right? So, and how to apply this to day-to-day life. What are a couple of these kind of triggers, either biological or relational or emotional, that would push us into these fight, flight, freeze states? And then how do we come into ventral vagal and more of
yeah,
that present higher self, values based, calm state?
yeah. Well, I think you've done a really beautiful job, Jake, like just kind of outlining your self awareness, like your attempt to really like study your pattern, your cycle, yeah, like where you are like less regulated and where you're trying to get more regulated. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of examples we could give, but I think I would just really encourage, each of us to be like paying attention, right? When am I, like I was doing on the show earlier, it's like, when am I feeling my heart rate escalating? What are those triggers? Like you said, um, for me in this moment, right? This idea of like, man, I want so bad for people to get good information. I want to bring value. I want to be of help. And so that, even though it's a good thing, can drive me into maybe a less healthy place, right?
I actually, you just cued this for me, that I think is something that's very meaningful, which is you talked about your level of care and desire to make a difference for people. I think so frequently we can get caught up in the fear or the tension that we feel, the stress that we feel, and feeling like, "Well, what's wrong with me? And why do I feel this way? And why am I so stressed out? And I have to make it go away." Where the core, right? So I experience this in my content a lot. Like I'll get kind of the procrastination thing. Like I'm going to move into this happened with my last podcast episode, which was about these experiences actually that I'm talking about. They're really deeply meaningful to me. And I'm like, I want to share these with people and I really want it to hit home and help people. And that almost it drives kind of this tension and this desire to kind of control and do it all perfect. And then this procrastination thing I'll go through of like not quite wanting to dive in because I want to do it just right. And if I'm able to just get attuned, and I use IFS every day, all day, I just love it so much. Getting attuned with those parts and saying, "Hey, I'm here. Tell me about what you're going through," so I can recognize that and I can appreciate, the parts of me that are kind of trying to show up as managers to control all that and, make sure I do everything right. The core intent, right? These parts of me, as I've gotten to know them, they want to make a difference. They want to live a meaningful life, be a good person, achieve and accomplish. And I can actually appreciate those parts instead of getting caught up in the surface level stress. Like, thank you for trying to show up. And you really want great things for me and my life and the people around me. It's so beautiful. And just getting in touch with the core intent,
Yeah.
because that I feel like that's the truth. That's the real underlying truth is we want good things. The
Yes.
kind of the half truth or the lie is like you are your fear and it's bad for you to feel this way. And right.
Yeah. That is so well said. And let me try and reflect back without getting too wordy on that the goal of all of this is integration, right? So the goal is not, because I think this is where our left brain manager parts say, okay, dorsal bad, ventral good, don't go to dorsal, go to ventral. And and
Yeah.
the difficulty with that and the beauty of this that I think this is probably the thing I love most about polyvagal theory is that the goal is not to just never go to dorsal, never go to sympathetic. It's like God designed these systems for our good, right? And even as I was saying earlier, I'm in a sympathetic state, but I'm not getting chased by a tiger. I'm trying to bring my passion. And if anything, the fear is like that I wouldn't bring it enough or I wouldn't bring it clearly enough or whatever. And so
Yes.
the irony is that you know, my desire for beauty and goodness is actually causing a stress state, right? But it's not that I don't want to get into that state. Here's the kicker is we want to integrate our ventral into sympathetic. We want to integrate our ventral into dorsal, which is the same as IFS, which is I don't want to get rid of my exiles or my protectors. I want to bring true self into a connection, a loving relationship with these parts and help them really flourish, right? I want my passion to be both turned up and full of life and energy as I'm bringing this, but I also, it has to be regulated and not just like spinning out of control. Otherwise I'm going to lose everyone that are the very people that I'm wanting to connect with. Right. So it's this
Yes.
infusion of true self, of ventral into sympathetic, into protective parts. Right. That is where there's like this synergistic effect, right? Where we actually really experience the greatest passion, intimacy, connection with others. Hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, it's fantastic. And it's so interesting to just consider, for me, I use the terms the mental mind and the emotional mind, which we could put it in all sorts of frameworks, but they play by different rules, right?
Mhm.
I may know something mentally and think, oh, well, it's not logical for me to be stressed about this. Your emotional mind doesn't, this doesn't register for your emotional mind. That's not, it plays by a different set of rules. And so my path or kind of what I need to do is not to think my way through it, is to feel my way through it.
Mhm.
And IFS has really taught me how to do this, doing this
Mhm.
practice each day of, look, that part of me feels what it feels. You know, it's stressed out about work, or it feels like I need to be productive 100% of the time, or I've got this craving coming up for masturbation, right? And it's just, well, why am I feeling this? It's there, man. So let's move toward it,
Yes.
seek to understand it, be present with it. You know, I use the term self empathy, right? You can actually empathize with these parts of you. Just, I'm in this pain with you right now. Let me feel this with you. I want to understand you. And that, being able to do that is very different than, well, okay, how do I think my way around this? Or how do I just be positive, or how to ignore this? Or
Yeah.
these thoughts don't need to be here, right? All these kind of manager or firefighter strategies that we'll use, which ultimately just fuel addiction, when this part of me just needs to be heard.
Yes.
It's what we all want, just to be heard, to be understood, to
Yes.
feel compassion.
So beautiful, man. Yeah, and it's a little counterintuitive, right? We're just so used we're not we grew up in a Western culture and in a modern culture where, it's everything's binary, either or, either this is good or it's bad. It's like, now those categories are just not helpful. It's both and.
And that's actually, it's so funny because, I have this part of me I call the organizer, which it's, put things in boxes and categories for everything. And there's, tendency towards black and white thinking, but really very much planning and organization and structure and tasks and lists. And it's a beautiful part of me. I love it. Right. It's very prone towards, again, that black and white or perfectionistic kind of thinking. Right. And so when I was just studying up briefly on polyvagal theory, I did exactly what you said, which was like, okay, so dorsal vagal bad and sympathetic bad. Well, I want to be in ventral vagal. That's where I want to be at, and not kind of self-aware of that black and white thinking. Really, it's the integration, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite, movies is Inside Out, right? And Inside Out 2.
Yes. Oh,
And
so
and one
good.
of my favorite scenes in Inside Out 1 is at the very end when Riley comes back in, and if you remember, really Inside Out, that movie is about a 12-year-old girl that is experiencing the grief of being moved across the country and losing all of her social engagement connections, right? Being isolated and alone and not having parents that really attune and connect with her because they're in the midst of trying to do this, cross-country move. And so really, like, you've got a movie that is about a little girl trying to learn how to grieve, which really means learning how to not grieve because there's no one helping her with that. And so, and how many of us, that's our story, right? It's like we're just kind of feeling like on our own, trying to, like you said earlier, like trying to learn how to connect with this anxious little boy inside. And so at the end of the movie, she comes in and she finally lets herself feel sad, lets herself feel this grief in relationship with her parents. And not only do they not push her away, they invite her in and they say, oh, and they embrace. And then this magical thing happens. She has this moment of integration between sadness or exile and love, her true self, right? And attachment. And so you get this ball that goes from blue or yellow to blue and yellow, right? And it's just this
Yes.
beautiful moment. That is what we're talking about, that integration, right? Of being able to hold both of those things.
Such an incredible moment. And Inside Out too, goes to a whole higher level of complexity, I feel like. And when I first saw it, I really loved it. But then it was about a year of just deep dive into IFS and practicing it every day for me in my life. And when I watched it again, and I remember I was just like, oh my gosh, the people who wrote this are geniuses. This is IFS from beginning to end. And then I looked it up online and it's like, yeah, IFS practitioners helped write this material. I was like, oh, okay,
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
and the reason I bring that, Jake, is because that is one, again, another thing in polyvagal is that there's places where they will color code dorsal as blue and sympathetic as red and ventral as green. And then there's one of the best images I've ever seen is where you've got those things going up one side of the ladder, and on the other side you have green and blue mixed. What does a ventral dorsal, experience look like? And that is the felt sense of that is rest, right?
Mhm.
Is the ability to just like kind of feel calm in my nervous system when I infuse ventral into dorsal. That is what I'm looking for, right? Is a restful state. And when I infuse the green into the red of sympathetic, right? What that translates is play and passion. That's when I'm in my creative self and I get to like, really live with a sense of energy and excitement about life, right? But again, it's healthy. And then, when I'm in entirely green, it's that social engagement. And so the hope is that I'm really being able to experience more integration in my life. That's the goal. I just want to make sure we stick the landing on that.
Yes, that's fantastic, and I just one brief thing I wanna say with that, I had this experience recently of coming down with a virus and, have a newborn as well, so lacking sleep, and just feeling really dysregulated and tired and low energy. And I remember I feel all this tension. Often when that happens, when I get tired and I feel like I'm not as capable, there's this tension. Like I have to do more. I have to do all this stuff. I have so much to do. And I had this moment of just silence sitting there with my newborn and realizing I am in this battle with these, parts of me are battling right now. I'm in this tug of war. And what if I accepted I can't move as quickly right now? I didn't do it successfully, honestly, but at least I brought awareness
Mm.
to it and was like, maybe I could accept that I do feel tired. Maybe I could accept that I do feel sick and that it is difficult right now. And it is okay for me to slow down a bit and have different expectations. And I kind of see that as similar to what you're saying, kind of in that vein of bringing in that self awareness, that ventral vagal state, right, into you know, because my body wants to rest. Part of me is saying, you need to rest. It's like, no, I
Mhm.
won't rest. Right. And that's bringing that into perhaps the dorsal vagal state and ventral and dorsal coming together in that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say meeting the sympathetic too, because there's the manager parts that are like, just go, go, go. So I'm meeting them too. It's like, hey, I know you want to go, go, go. I get that. I understand you're trying so hard right now. And I appreciate how passionate you are. And we do need to slow down a bit. It's okay for us to slow down, you
Yep.
know? Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, this is fantastic. What a beautiful conversation. I just appreciate it so much and appreciate you. I think it would be lovely for people to know just how they can work with you. And I know that you do group coaching. That's kind of your bread and butter, from what I understand. But what you do, what you provide, and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, well, to that point, I mean, whether it's me or anyone else, one thing that Johan Hari said, gosh, it's been like 15 years ago now, but he said early on that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. And so there's a kind of a catchphrase these days, but that everything we're talking about is like connecting, with our parts, connecting with ourselves in terms of like, healthy, integrated, experience in our nervous system. And so for me, recovery, health, healing, wholeness, it just, as much as, I've done individual work for 20 years with folks, as well as always run groups as well on the side. And I just, over the years, it's like makes more and more sense to me. But it's like, man, people that are in groups always get better faster without any question in my mind. It's just like, it's a no brainer. And I've kind of known that, but I just have really finally just said, you know what, I'm going to go all in on groups because this is such a relational disease, disorder, disconnection, right? Like because everything is rooted in relational detachment, disconnection, relational healing, in my experience, is really best, most effectively served in relational connection. So yeah, so that's all I do these days is I run, I actually have men's and women's groups now, but we just run groups and we do the work together. This is not like classic accountability groups. It's not 12-step groups. Like this is where we do IFS together. We do this polyvagal theory work together. So we part of it is learning together and that, creates a synergy, but really it's about practicing and failing together. So that just gets me really excited. So yeah, the, the coaching company that I have is called Breath to Bones, and that's based out of Ezekiel 37. I can give you guys some of the information and content on that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. I'll put some links in the show notes for it. Breath to bones. Right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks again, man. Such a privilege to have you on, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you, brother.